Okay.
Great. Hello, Liberty.
Hello.
I'm so happy to be with you here today. We're entering a first session to explore business development in the context of Woodbine Education Center.
Mm-hmm.
So you approached me because you and your board were exploring earned income, right?
Mm-hmm.
Social enterprises within or somehow connected to Woodbine Education Center that would provide earned income revenue streams for WEC for 2021
Mm-hmm.
and beyond.
That's right. That's right.
And
Yeah.
so, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to explain a bit. We are a land-based center, and so we have a sort of unique set of financials where we have a lot to cover that maybe a smaller organization or an organization that would be kind of at our starting point might not have those sort of expenses. So we are using kind of a different model than some other organizations might use, where we're actually looking for more of like 2/3 of our income coming from earned revenue streams and only a third coming from those like more traditional sources of funding, like for nonprofits, like grants and individual donors.
Great. So 2/3 of your income at what point in next year or in 5 years would be from earned income?
Yeah. So it would be next year, but we
Okay.
luckily already have one very established mode of income for the
Mm-hmm.
facility, which is our retreat program, which is renting out to other social justice groups, movement groups, and other kind of groups in our region to use the facility. So we sort of have that one established. So that's going to cover the majority of that 2/3 number, but we still need others to sort of flesh it out. And knowing that the organization is going to grow, we need to start now with some additional models.
Yes. And you said rental arrangement for these activist groups is already established.
Mm-hmm.
Is that currently represented in your finances as making up a large portion of your income?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, we can. You have seen our budget, and so that's represented under retreats, I think it's called, or facility.
Facility rentals?
That's right. Yeah. So that's
Okay,
that.
got it.
That's that very big number.
Got it.
The rest of the
Great.
numbers are small in comparison.
Yes. So the documents that we will be referencing in the course of this conversation, I'm just going to list them off, and they may be available to people to review who, are interested in learning more or supporting. Those documents are a spreadsheet of the 6-year projections for Woodbine Education Center. And yes, it is row 6 that covers facility rentals, and it's showing first quarter 2021 that number is 100,000, which is an order of magnitude over the other figures in that
Mm-hmm.
column. And then there are 6 distinct new income streams, six distinct potential business models that you are examining as possibilities. And then there's also Woodbine Education Center Theory of Change, Call for Consortium Partners, Mission, Vision, and Core Values. Those are 3 additional documents that might be referenced in this context.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So let's see. So I'd like to provide, and sorry, I'm not always going to be able to look at you on the video because I'm looking at my notes and I'm taking notes during this meeting. So it may be a little disorienting for me at times. But what I'd like to do right now is kind of go into an overview of what I foresee the next 4 sessions entailing in terms of content and questions, and then move into this particular session's content, which is organized by three kind of sections in a sense. The first section is going to be background. That's just collecting details about your thinking, your process up to this point, and how you arrived at those 6 business models and those revenue projections. And in this section, it's okay to say, you know, it's just something we were kicking around and we don't actually have a strong sense of the revenue and things like that. It's okay wherever you're at in this moment. It's just kind of collecting information about that. The second section would be kind of overview of considerations, like the big picture organizing questions that'll organize our movement through these development processes. And then visioning and planning for strategy. So asking some critical questions about the vision, the potential structures, the potential use of resources, and there will be some homework in that. I don't expect to get too much into the granular considerations of each business model until the second session or even the third. But in the second and third and fourth sessions, we would be exploring the specific business models and, you know, analysis thereof, and exploration of go, no go points, right? Which is when in the process of a startup development process would you decide that this is a go or this is a no-go. So this first session, I hope we're going to be able, whoops, I hit the microphone. This first session, I hope we are going to be able to consider holistically, like what is, you know, Woodbine's relationship to these entities and that kind of a thing. And then the next sections will go into more granular analysis. We'll also be using tools like business model canvases, which are adapted to social enterprises specifically to capture information from these sessions and then turn that into a tool for, are you familiar with business model canvas?
No. In my head, I'm imagining it's like a template of
Yes,
something.
it's a one-page template that is kind of like a one-page business model or business plan, rather. It just kind of captures all the pieces of that are necessary for the ultimate business plan. So it's a fantastic tool for orienting and organizing information and organizing vision and launching you toward, you know, the later developments of business plan and which you need to get financing and things like that. So we'll be trying to pull things into that container. And I think related to that, there's questions of which assets, which resources will you be leveraging to actually implement each of these business models? And then, of course, the question of, you know, market analysis and viability, right? Profitability, like in terms of how much it would cost to deliver this. Is it worthwhile? Is it actually going to be profitable? Perfect. So we will look at how to look at those questions in the later sessions. Do you have any questions at the moment?
No, excited to jump in.
Great. All right. Let's jump in. So I would like to begin with just collecting more information, more background. Great. So the 6 different business models, and let's take them one by one, are property leases, speaking engagements, wedding rentals, plant nursery, wood workshop, and winter tree sales. So I'm going to ask a set of questions for each one, the same questions for each one. And those questions are, where did the idea for this business come from? I'll review them all again in the context of each one, but I'm just going to give you the overview. Where did the idea for this business come from? That's the why, right? How did this come about? Was it through discussions or through specific offerings that people in your community have? Something maybe somebody noticed about an opportunity, right? So where did this idea come from? Where did the revenue projections come from? And in one sentence or 5, we'll say a paragraph, right? What is the business idea? Like, what is being sold and what resources are being used to sell that?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's, in that question, what is the business idea? There's the what, and then there's the how, which is the resources it uses, and then the who, which is who are the target customers. So we'll
Mm-hmm.
go through all of that for each. So I don't know how long this will take, but we'll just see what's there and we'll just go through it. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's start with property leases.
Okay.
First question is, where did the idea for this business come from?
Okay. I'm going to kind of briefly just give a little bit of our background because we're sort of Woodbine Education Center is in this unique place where we are an organization that is just a few years old, but we are sort of inheriting space and some operations of another entity that has been existing for about 10 years. So we're sort of in the midst of a big transition. Hence the sort of need to raise a lot of capital to run the organization, and also the testing of like new models. So the property leases idea came from it's probably about a year old, um, and it started from an idea of bringing in sort of forming a consortium to run the land with other entities, thinking that some cost sharing spread out amongst a couple of organizations might be better suited to run the operations of a center that's pretty large and moderately expensive. So that's where it started. But what we're finding is that potential partners really were just sort of looking for one organization that would manage all of that, and they could partner in their specific way. So we don't have any commitments from anyone yet, but what this looks like is Caroline referenced the call for partners. So really this is referencing that. So we are putting out a call for partner organizations to connect with us in ways that we have not explored in the past. So this could look like renting out office space, or it could look like renting out a piece of the facility, land to grow or to use as a research site. It's sort of, we have a list of just exploring new ways that organizations could utilize our space that we are not currently doing. So we're just sort of opening the door and seeing what's out there, and hoping to develop some kind of long-term relationships and leases with organizations. This could be seasonal, this could be year-round. We're not sure yet what these relationships could look like, but we're open to it, and so we're sort of putting out our dating profile to see who maybe wants to date us and partner in utilizing that space.
Wonderful. And that actually connects with another deeper question I have later in the meeting, but I figure I'll raise it now, which is that approach of connecting with partners seeking to build relationships and leaseholder agreements, um, that is maybe applicable in some of these other business models as
Mm.
well, in terms of potentially finding a partner to really implement or run and manage certain business activities, if they have a vested interest in it, and then some portion of that proceeds would go to WEC. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely some possibilities. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even under the platform of property leases, when we put out the call for partners, we included different models for the relationship to be reciprocated. So it could look like profit sharing together, or it could look like a monthly rental fee. That's a more traditional way. But we are open to exploring other ways to like make these relationships financially viable and reciprocated to both parties.
Great. And to clarify, you said that you haven't gotten a partnership lined up yet. Okay.
Oh, also, we haven't pushed very hard yet. So this has been sort of a soft release to like a few people, this sort of major call for partners. We've been needing to get a few ducks in a row before sort of releasing like a larger just public call. But hopefully that's coming very soon. So hopefully with that public call, we'll start to be able to negotiate these relationships. But I will say that, we're talking at a time where we're in the middle of a pandemic. And I think that this model is susceptible uh, to sort of be affected by what's happening in our country right now. So we'll see. How it seems to be more of a time of like hunkering down than it is of like expanding and exploring new ideas. So, but maybe this may be the right time for some people.
Yeah, those are great observations, and we'll continue to bring in the lens of COVID scenarios as we, proceed down this path. So, great. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So, for this business model, where did the revenue projections come from in your
Hmm.
6-year projection sheet?
Yeah, they're a little loosey goosey for this one. Sort of roughly thinking 3 organizations, 10,000 each, um, over the course of a year.
Okay. Okay.
But that could look very different for different things. So,
Right. Okay. That's great. So the business idea in one sentence, I think you've already actually said this. It's about leasing various parts of the property to partner organizations. You mentioned office rentals, um, pieces of the facility for business growth or use as a research site.
mhm,
Um, so the resources that it would leverage, let's talk about what resources it would take to actually offer that. Obviously, there's the physical usage of land, property. What else would be implicated in that model?
mhm. We would need the internal contact. So the person
Mm-hmm.
who on our side is the connection for that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So a little bit of staff time. um, Also, we sort of would need, we currently have a lawyer engaged with us that's sort of helping us through our transition process. So somebody to kind of look over lease agreements and make sure those are solid and sound. Um, I'm not sure if this answers the question directly, but also just making sure that those ideas are, as they're explored, aren't affecting or impacting other areas that we are allocating for financial resources to be generated from. So like
Right.
we also need to be able to have rentals going on, and run the nursery if we have a nursery, things like that.
Yes. Um, and I have a recommendation that's a holistic one about analyzing those mutual impacts. Because yes, obviously, in order to consider all of these models, you have to ensure that not one of them would functionally and deeply, fundamentally like um, impair the ability of another one to operate and to make revenue. And so
Mm-hmm.
I have a suggestion for how to look at that. Hopefully, we'll get to that before the end of today's session.
Mm-hmm.
And so, target customers for this property lease, we already discussed that. It's organizations that are already in your network, have
Mm-hmm.
affinity with your mission, etc. Anything else you want to add about that before we move on?
Yeah, just briefly, we did sort of identify like, do we actually have a target, and what is it that's sort of our, so we're looking for, as it reflects in our mission, which is more geared towards people. This is more geared towards organizations, but folks who are out there who are trying to create a more just and regenerative world. So that's important to us. We'd like that to also be important. So we sort of have some mission
Great.
alignment, and that we're using our center for ways to further our mission.
Great. That was another one of my questions that we will get to in the next section. But so let's continue on, and just in the interest of time, we'll see kind of how quickly we can move through these questions.
Hmm.
So speaking engagements is next. Where did this idea come from?
So Woodbine has historically been asked to speak at various things. It's never really been a revenue source for us. We've also never very pursued it in a strong way. Sort of just has happened randomly. This idea actually is so it's taking that sort of thing that already happens, but formalizing it a bit more, actively pursuing it a bit more. But also, we would like to partner. The idea involves partnering with other people who are sort of already part of our network and our community to create a speaker pool for a larger banner of issues. So sort of eco social justice speakers. So under that banner, having several people who are affiliated with us, um, people in our community, and sort of placing us all in one space and doing profit sharing with those speakers. So if you wanted to use somebody out of that speaker network and you used us to book that in that speaking engagement, then we would just do a profit sharing model.
Okay. And the, those last details you just shared about the profit sharing and the pool of speakers, where did that idea come from?
I don't know. I just I, I'm not sure. I thought of it. Um, I it just it did there doesn't it doesn't seem to be it seems to be happening in some other parts of the country, um, but not really for our region. And I think that we are rich with amazing people who sort of really have a similar message in that they're coming from a decolonization praxis. And
Mhm.
uh, yeah, I think Denver has a lot of people sort of espousing that message, and I think it'd be nice to put everybody in one place.
That's
But
great.
yeah.
That's perfect. That's all I was looking for. Yeah. Thank you. Um, cool. Okay. So where did the revenue projections come from? And to be clear, the revenue projections are related to a profit sharing model with a pool of speakers who are doing their own speaking activities.
That's right.
Okay, great.
Um, but also, if folks were staff, core members of our team, maybe our board members, then we might be
Gotcha.
receiving more of that income. So that looks like another kind of loosey goosey projection of just thinking, okay, maybe 5 to 7 engagements, a couple $100 a piece adds up to about $1,500 in the first year. I'm actually just want to mention, I think that might be a bit high, but of a number possibly. So I think this might actually be like a lower um, financial valued income stream, but also it has other values for us, sort of positioning us and marketing us as like a movement center in our region.
Awesome. Great. Okay. So the business idea, you've already kind of expressed that, and the resources it leverages. What are some of those resources that will be needed to make this make this a reality?
I think the biggest thing that we don't have right now is a functioning kind of spot on a website that
Mm,
will so we sort of need like a web builder or some of that back end
okay.
technological help to kind of get us all up there in a good way that features people. And then we also need to do the work to build out those asks and also figuring out what those profit sharing models look like. um, so
Great.
yeah, recruiting people to be part of that pool, and then really knowing what it is that we're asking them to do with us.
Excellent. Do you see any uses of staff or land or other assets or resources in this?
Some of the staff members or um, internal would be inside of that speaker pool, so we'd have to
Got
allocate
it.
like some staff time to be able to
Hmm.
fulfill those obligations.
Great.
But yeah, not so much the land. I don't think that I really see this as like an external or online kind of endeavor.
Gotcha. At least in during the COVID period,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Great. Okay. And the target customers, who would be interested in this product or service?
Um, so I think this is gonna look like maybe some academic spheres, universities and colleges, conferences, national organizations. Um, I think those would be the kind of larger ducks to market this
Mhm.
to, and then um, locally, I think we could be available at schools, like instead of like the higher education institutions, but um, like middle schools and elementary schools.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so yes, let's move on. How is this process feeling so far? Is this, I know it's taking up a fair amount of time, but it
Yeah.
is helpful to get kind of the context for what you're considering.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to. I'm just wondering if I'm going on too much about the different stuff.
I think it's really helpful to actually see your thinking and to see some of the strategic thinking too that's already gone into arriving at these 6 models.
Hmm.
So I think it's really valuable. And the there's a little bit of a tension because I'm asking you about these 6 models distinctly and who they're targeting and how and all that. But by the end of this session, I actually hope to open up some questions um, that are at a more holistic level of even considering venturing down this path. So I'm just noticing that, and
Hmm.
that's kind of an implicit tension.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but we can keep going, or
Hmm.
yeah, if you feel comfortable with that.
I do. Yeah. And yeah, especially
Great.
if it's helpful.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful to see into the context of these ideas. And to learn more about your overall experiences in the past, your models that you're like where they came from in your thinking. Um, so let's talk about wedding rentals. So where did this idea come from?
Yeah. Historically, Woodbine has hosted a couple of weddings, mine included.
Mhm.
Um, and I have felt over the years that it's sort of an underutilized market. Um, it is not directly related to our mission. So it's the one kind of exception in our sphere of um, revenue ideas that we're pursuing that isn't really mission driven. Um, but I think it is lucrative. So it is a way that we can sort of um, offer something with a great financial benefit for minimal work that could also sustain these other activities that we do that are more mission driven. um, so we have limited experience. It sort of came from that, but it's a the whole wedding market is very, very new to us.
Great. So where did the revenue projections for this come from?
So this is one that I have concerns about it sort of impeding on our other rental streams. So they're both sort of rentals, facility rentals. So our $100,000 number for facility rentals, that's coming from more mission-driven organizations that sort of match us. The wedding rentals, so I didn't want to impede because they're basically doing the same thing, which is renting the facility. So I thought if we extend our season about 2 months, because Woodbine is currently seasonal, we're hoping to expand that, but we are seasonal right now. So if we expand our season by 1 month on either side, that's about 8 weeks. So I'm not thinking, that it's just exclusively weddings in April and exclusively weddings in November, but I figured that's about 8 weeks that I wasn't including in that $100,000 number. So 8 weeks of weddings thinking it's probably just going to be weekends that people will rent the facility for that, and then using a number of like a total facility rental times 8 weeks. So that's where that $50,000 number came in. And so another just factor is cost of renting the facility is usually greatly reduced for organizations that are doing work in the community. So this is an area we can really charge full price for the facility rental. So that's why it's like so much higher, even though it's less of an amount of time
Okay.
than the other model.
And just to clarify, total facility rental times 8 weeks, you're not actually expecting that every day of the week is going to be rented? Are you thinking it's by weekend?
Yeah, I'm thinking it's probably a Friday rental.
Gotcha.
Combined with a Saturday, or a Friday rental for one wedding, a Saturday rental for another.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably, yeah.
Roughly 2 rentals per weekend.
That's right.
And 8 weekends.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Great, so I think we got information about the business idea, the resources it leverages. You mentioned that it kind of it covers the same territory as the facility rentals. So we talked about that. What are your thoughts on staff or wedding specific capacities to add to the resources needed?
So we want to handle this business, as solely just renting facilities. We've checked with our lawyer. Rentals are non-taxable, but we can't provide like other services. So we can't launch a catering business, or we could do janitorial stuff. That's kind of covered in sort of renting the space, but we couldn't like do more services for them. So there isn't much. It's pretty hands off in terms of the staffing. We just need to make sure the facility is clean, which is something we have a practice of. So there is some staff. So it's whoever is organizing those contracts and is their contact inside the organization. Whoever is preparing the facilities, cleaning them, sanitizing them, bringing out equipment, things like that. So those would be the staff time. But then the market that I'm two things. So this would be an area of marketing investment that we have not done before. So we really need to like figure out the expenses to sort of market in the wedding world. And the second thing is, I think in the first year we could really market as sort of rustic, and but I do think to really excel in that sort of realm, we might need to do some beautification projects of the land. Weddings are about pictures and the look of things and stuff like that. So there might be some investment in facility upgrades to be competitive. But I do think that we could sort of stagger that, maybe start with where we are, just be very honest about, because I think that's attractive to some people as well.
Wonderful.
Rustic, simple.
Great. And have you given any thought to a partner or like a company that you would specifically refer people to get their other, ancillary services for the wedding handled?
I haven't explored it that much, but it's a great idea. I think making friends with some caterers, making friends with some event planners, cross promoting each other, that could be a great foot in the door.
Great. Okay. And so your target customers are going to be people seeking wedding rentals, wedding venues, of course, but specifically those that are, either interested in kind of the rustic atmosphere and or your mission, right? Anything else about the target customers?
No. Yeah, those are really the two things.
Great. Okay. All right. Let's move on then. Unless there's anything else to add to weddings. The next section would be plant nursery. So where did this idea for this business come from?
Originally, I think it's coming from a conversation that I was having with a fellow like staff member. So it's like some of the other streams, it's sort of taking something that we have done and just pushing it further in what seems like its natural direction. So we've had a garden on site for a decade or so. We have a greenhouse that we don't really use to its full capacity right now, has some hydroponics set up inside of it. And looking at other land-based centers and how they stay afloat. So some of our like fellow sister sites have nurseries, and where they have succeeded is really finding a niche market that sort of ties in with their identity. So I'm not 100% sure what ours would be, but I think it's maybe somewhere around perennials, indigenous plants, to this region, medicinals, things like that maybe you we'd be like a specialized plant nursery for. Also programmatically, this is a new development, but ties in very nicely. Programmatically, because of COVID, we've sort of pivoted some of our programming, and we are going in a direction of having seeds be our container. So on multiple fronts, we'll sort of be talking about seeds, and then this is the sort of living out of those seeds into their plant forms.
Great. Seeds be our container.
Mm.
Seeds like as a metaphor. Like, could you say more about that?
Yeah, literal and metaphorically. So in the literal sense, creating programming that is informative around seeds. Also looking at their sort of ability to um, be sort of they're also metaphorically, so looking at seeds change and sort of bring life. And so we'll be literally teaching about seeds, also using that sort of ecological analysis to human patterns. So bringing in that sort of metaphor for seeds and human practices, and then expanding that to a bit more philosophically thinking about seeds, and seeding the future, and that would encompass our sort of movement building work. So we have sort of our land-based education and our ecology side and our social justice movement building side, both sort of underneath this banner of seeds.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's great. So it's like a unified theme for the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Okay, so where did the revenue projections for this business model come from?
Mm-hmm. I just really thinking, I don't know, just really throwing it out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is an area where, I'm not really sure how a nursery business runs.
Mm-hmm.
Not really sure about profit margin for labor, and so just thought 5,000 was maybe a small enough number. Also, that's really looking at like hoping that will be profit. So maybe it's considerable expenses, and yeah. So don't really know that number. It just kind of came out of nowhere.
No problem. No problem with that. It's good to just be honest about that. And yeah, it might be a somewhat complex business model operationally compared to the other ones that we've discussed so far. So what is the business idea in one sentence? You've already given me that. Resources that it leverages. So you mentioned the garden, the greenhouse. Would there also need to be an area on site that actually is like a stand that sells? What kind of staff would be involved?
Yeah, need to explore some of this. Also, I was thinking it could be a staggered. Um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, so I sort of spent some time visioning with a fellow staff member. If this could be everything that we dreamed it would be, what would that look like? So
Mm.
we're like another 50-foot greenhouse, using this side of the property to grow a retail store, etc. But I'm not sure if that's all needs to roll out in year one. So we have
Right.
some resources that we could use that are already in place, and maybe we could just grow to a larger level where we can sort of afford some of those larger spaces. Um, I am not I know that it's going to take a staff person some considerable time to sort of run this program, but I'm not sure how much yet, and I'm not
Okay.
sure, I don't have in mind like which staff person that would be yet, or if we
Okay.
maybe need to hire someone else.
Okay. Someone else. Okay, cool. Um, and then the target customers, you actually mentioned finding a niche for your nursery that's consistent with your land-based organizational identity.
Mhm.
Is there anything more you wanted to add about target customers for the
Yeah,
nursery?
I think being a niche will help us like get some people to travel to us, because we are about
Mm-hmm.
45 minutes southwest of Denver. But I also think we don't really engage our local population. So our center is located in Douglas County, and really like 90% of the people that we sort of interact with are like Denver based, or Denver metro area based. So I think that this is a way that we can really engage more of our local um, population in Douglas County, and sort of bring, this is something that I think that they might be interested in, and a great sort of gateway into some of our theoretical analysis of the world. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Um, cool. So let's move on to wood workshop. And I'm looking at the time. Technically, we were supposed to go till 12:30. We didn't really start get into the heart of the conversation though till about 10 minutes in. So just wanting to check in. Are you comfortable with going to 12:40
Hmm.
or even a few minutes after?
Yep,
What
that's
is
fine.
your availability?
Yeah, I don't have anything after this, so
Okay,
we can
great.
expand as much as you are able and are.
Right. Yes. We'll keep it close to 12:45. And everything that we didn't get to, I can send some of it as homework assignments and things like that. We can also just pick up where we left off next time.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. Okay. So the wood workshop. Where did the idea for this come from?
We have a workshop on the land that we don't really use very much. A staff member spent some time. It was, kind of full of stuff, and just underutilized. So a staff member cleaned it all out. That same staff member is also very good at woodworking. And when we really think about being place-based and what we have there at our, thinking of our center and our resources, we have a lot of wood. We manage a 62-acre forest. We need to do something with our wood products that come from our forest, and so turning, I think this is like a natural way to sort of expand. We have these resources of wood. We have someone who's very good at woodworking. Let's put the two together and sort of create some educational programs and like sort of retail business for like wood products. So dreaming big, I think this could look like, if it makes sense, a small like mill, like wood mill, like a in a like a tinker woodworking mill, that could teach about wood, woodworking, wood products. But I also think that that space could also double with some other building projects, and yeah. So thinking of using our resources, using our the skill members of staff um, who are currently great at that type of thing, but also a sort of business entity that I really don't know much about, and I'm not quite sure how um, what that will all look like.
Sorry, could you say that last part again? The part you don't know what it looks like?
Yeah, I tried to sort of see like are there any mills around Colorado that people
Mm.
can have access to? And, I didn't really find that. So I'm, I don't know where to look to see, who's doing this and what those spaces could look like. So it's a kind of a big unknown for me.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so where did the revenue projections come from for this? And the revenue would be from both selling wood products and education. Is that right?
Hmm. Hmm. That's
Okay.
right. Yep. Same as the plant nursery, sort of drawn mostly from thin air, but keeping it at a reasonable number of like 5,000. Maybe that's a small number to start with, but could be less. And also, same
Okay.
as the plant nursery, I think it might be we could sort of have stages of development. So maybe start small, work up to building some, or maybe buying some equipment.
Mhm. Okay, great. Yeah, that's helpful. Okay, so resources that it leverages. You talked about existing talents on staff, existing resources in terms of wood on the land.
Hmm.
You also mentioned that it may require the acquisition of equipment, facilities upgrades. So in that sense, it may be somewhat capital intensive to start.
Hmm.
Um, and so anything else about resources that it would use?
No, we might need some more professional development training, I think, possibly in that area. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of those where when it's time to do market research, you may find that this model is so speculative because it is not very viable on the whole compared to like other people who've started it. Like the reason you may be not finding other mills is because it's hard to do that for some obscure, market reasons. So anyway, that the market research phase is an undertaking that's relevant for each of these business models, but we'll go through it for each one when the time comes for that.
great.
Um, okay, so target customers, that also feels a little ambiguous,
Hmm.
right? I mean, in terms of education, maybe that's a bit clearer, but in terms of the wood products,
Yeah, I do think it could also, like the plant nursery, engage some of our local community.
okay.
I think that this stream might be, um, a portion of it might be more um, about engaging youth. I think
Mm-hmm.
some of the programming could be for young people.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Okay,
yeah.
great. All right, we're on to our last one. How's that feel?
Yeah.
All right, so winter tree sales.
Okay. This
Yes, where
one's
did that come from?
Yeah, this one's a bit fun. So, um, and again, thinking about our resources, we have trees. We have trees that we have to cut down every year. So we were sort of thinking around holiday time. People are looking for Christmas trees,
Mm-hmm.
and holiday trees. So maybe it could be really fun to do sort of a winter festival, um, in the winter season in December. A couple of weekends that month. Um, we're not sure of the legal rationale here, but it could look like people coming to cut down their own tree, or maybe we have cut some already. Um, Marketing it as a kind of a niche, eco tree business. So, these trees are not grown just to be Christmas trees, so they're not perfect. They're sort of, maybe the not your typical Christmas tree, but they are, coming from land, and there's a whole ecosystem that we can follow here, because like the harvesting of these trees sort of protects our forest, and we can talk about fire mitigation and things like that. So turning into a learning experience. We also thought it could turn into like a little festival as well, like maybe rides, or selling cider, or a holiday bazaar. Maybe invite some of our colleagues who, um, you know sort of make products to come and sell their wares.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so this idea came out of just noticing that you had trees on the land, and it might be fun to do a winter festival. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So,
Perfect.
and specifically from a staff member, Hannah. It was her idea that she came up with.
Great. Okay. And where did the revenue
Um, just think,
projections come from for this?
yeah, just thinking about, maybe $30 a tree, divided that by, or multiplied that by how many trees we thought could sell over the course of a month, and just came up
Okay.
with like a small number to start,
Okay.
3,000.
So, and that's the 3,000 is referencing just the trees sold
Yeah.
and not other, profits from the market or things like
Yeah.
that.
'Cause we
Okay.
haven't really explored what that would look like yet. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Haven't projected the market sales. Okay. Um, so the resources that this would leverage, I heard the trees on the land, potentially some staff to cut down the trees, facilitate the actual sales to customers that are presumably coming onto your site to purchase trees.
Mhm.
Um,
Probably volunteers as well. I could
mhm.
see. Mhm.
Volunteers for the market, or what other aspect of?
Yeah, I think for the market, maybe some parking, directing,
Gotcha.
crowd, engaging with the crowd in different ways.
Mhm. Okay. Um, anything else about resources that it would take?
Just maybe some legal consulting.
Okay,
Want to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe and um, doing the right thing.
great. Okay. And so the target customers, I heard some things in there, but why don't you just answer that fresh? Who are the target customers for the tree sales?
Yeah, people looking for a more meaningful holiday
Mm,
tree. Um, I think this could also be local, engaging that Douglas County community.
great.
Mhm.
And do you, in contrast to the nursery and the woodworking, do you foresee that this could be viable in year one, or that this would be something to build towards?
I think that we can roll this out in year one.
Okay.
It's also happening at a time when we are not that busy. So
Mm-hmm.
December is a very snowy time for us, and we don't typically have a lot going on. Um,
Great.
mhm,
Great. Actually, that's a little detail related to how to leverage resources, right? Is that
mhm,
there'll be a bit of a slowdown for staff time and energy, so it fits in with that natural seasonal slowdown.
mhm.
Cool. Okay. Great. So, thank you. It is really helpful to get a picture of all of this. And frankly, some of the information that you just shared for each model is what would go into a business model canvas. So we have answers to some of those questions right here. You can just import them over to the business model canvas, which is great. So in the time we have left today, I wanted to touch on, um, actually, it seems appropriate to just kind of end on this note a little bit, or like touch on this question. So in the financial model that I originally saw, although that's been a little bit nuanced in the conversation today, which is good, but like in the model, it was showing that all of these 6 new streams of activity would be starting and would be generating substantial revenue in the first year.
Mhm.
And so that struck me, just as an analyst of these things, like that's maybe not such a feasible expectation. And so, my question was, perhaps it's more realistic to assume 1 or 2 of these will start in the first year. So just to review, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this from the conversation we just had, which of these business models at the moment do you feel most confident in as a whole and most realistic to start up in year one?
Hmm. Yeah, I was starting to have similar thoughts. So I think property leases and wedding rentals
Mm-hmm.
both are very sort of a wedding rentals for sure is very similar to something that we're already doing and have
Mm-hmm.
sort of some expertise to do.
Right.
Property rentals, I think it serves like a couple of purposes, like opening us up to community. We're sort of launching a new, so it goes along with that. Um, and I think my gut sort of says that we can make it work. Um, so I think those two are the two that could
Mm-hmm.
and maybe should launch in year one, and the
Mm-hmm.
other three or four could sort of, yeah, those are the two that I think are the forerunners.
Cool. Great, great. Excellent. Um, so with that in mind, I had kind of two things that I was hoping to go into at a high level that might become homework or might be something that we deepen in later conversations, but I want to give a prelude to them. Um, so the first question, one's kind of nested in the other. So let me address it from the first perspective. So when I was reviewing your materials and these business models, another thing that came up for me was I am not seeing much connection, or I didn't see it initially, right? Much connection between the proposed business activities and how they serve Woodbine's mission or are aligned with Woodbine's character, values, philosophy of change, and things like that. I read the description of, the activities, or from our conversation we had, I learned about the different business activities under consideration. And then when I read the mission, vision, theory of change, I was struck by how different that information appeared to me. Like I didn't see connection or overlap initially. Some of that's been clarified in this meeting because I heard you talk about things like, hey, we have these resources like trees on our land, and so to be sustainable, let's think about how we use them, right? The weddings, for example, you called out explicitly as being, hey, this is not values aligned, but it's so lucrative that it will allow us to provide the rest of our programming, right? So I got some more deep depth around that. But what I wanted to ask you to look at as kind of a homework thing is to filter each one of your business proposals through your values, your theory of change, and your principles and your mission. Just filter them through, evaluate them through that lens, and through risks and yields to in order to prioritize your resources strategically, right? So at the very least, coming out of that process, you would have clarity around, hey, this business model would maybe impact our mission in negative ways, or at least not in explicitly positive ways. How could we offset that, or like how could we just accept or address that as an organization? So just kind of that's my general suggestion. I don't necessarily have a standardized tool that you can use to do that,
Mm-hmm.
but just as a reflection activity, I would say go through your business models and just make those connections. How does this tie in to the values, mission, theory of change? And if it doesn't, is there opportunities to augment the proposal in a way that does, in a way that creates a linkage to your organization? Because in terms of the outcomes, right, the ultimate impacts, certainly income, right, like profitable, like revenue is the number one objective here of starting these business streams. But there may also be secondary impacts that, as a holistic ecological organization, you're looking to also measure some of those impacts, right?
Mhm.
So just a little exercise to consider. Um, and I know that there are some formal tools. This is something we can go into more depth in the subsequent session, around like impact analysis and, multiple bottom lines and things like
Mhm.
that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Do you have any questions about that just off the cuff right now?
No. Yeah, that sounds like a great first step.
Great. And that'll be really helpful if we come back together after you've done some reflection around that. The other thing, it's kind of related, but it's looking at it from a different, you're weighing different factors. So the other thing I was going to recommend is, are you familiar with the permaculture design process yourself?
Yeah, I
Great.
have a PDC.
Great. And I
Mhm.
imagine that others on your team do as well, or have some tie-in.
Mhm.
So if you have not done so, because it seems that in many of these models, your land, your place is such a huge asset and resource that you're leveraging in different ways. To do kind of a base map and analyze the different business activities, what kind of space they would physically consume and what resources they would physically consume, and also the staff and the kind of the flows, like just thinking about how energy would flow through the system to operationalize some of these business models, and then the space, how the energy flows through. Oh, and then right, and then interactions between business models, right? So noticing, oh, if we overlay this, so what I would actually suggest is create a base map and create 6 overlays for the 6 business models, and then layer them and notice what you notice about, oh, these things might conflict with each other, or there might be some overlap. Maybe that overlap can be made generative, like we combine staff or something, but just look at it and analyze for those factors. Because again, land is such a huge piece of this working. So those are my 2 recommendations to leave you with, and then we can come back together next time and proceed. How does that sound?
Great. Yeah, that sounds great.
Cool. All right. um, so you can go ahead and stop the recording now if you'd like. And then